Brenda here. When I opened this email, I didn't expect to read something so emotionally complex and deeply personal. It came from a woman who asked me not to use her name. She just wanted her story to be heard, to release what had haunted her for years. She titled it, "What I Did When I Found Out My Husband Had a Second Family." The next morning, she acted normal. She served breakfast, kissed him goodbye, and waved from the porch like always. But inside, she was studying him. Every movement, every word, every pause. She had lived with him for over 2 decades, but suddenly, he felt like a stranger in her kitchen. She began to collect evidence, quietly. Emails, text messages, travel logs, bank statements. She printed things late at night and hid them in an old shoebox under her daughter's bed. It wasn't just about confronting him. It was about understanding the depth of the deception. She needed to see how far it went. Days turned into weeks. And the more she uncovered, the more it broke her. He wasn't just seeing this other woman, he was living with her, supporting her, loving her. Their children called him Dad. They looked like him, one even had his dimples. She felt sick knowing. Her children weren't his only family. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal, it was the parallel life. The smiles, the memories, the normalcy he had with someone else. She wondered if he laughed differently when he was with them. If he ever missed her when he was away. Or if they were the real family and she had just been the cover. She couldn't tell her kids, not yet. They adored their father. She didn't want to shatter their image of him, at least not before she figured out what to do. So she waited and watched and plotted. She started therapy, pretending it was for stress. But in truth, she was preparing for war. Then, one afternoon, she followed him. He thought he was flying to Houston, but she saw the rental car reservation. He was staying local. She tailed him for over an hour until he pulled into a driveway she didn't recognize. A small, cozy house with a tire swing. A child ran to greet him. His child. She parked a block away, hands trembling. She watched him lift the child into his arms and kiss the woman who opened the door. It was too much. She lowered her head onto the steering wheel and screamed. Not out of rage, but out of grief. She had lost something she didn't even know. Was stolen. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, is that this confrontation would not go how she expected. Because behind that other door was a secret even the other woman didn't know. And when it came to light, it would twist everything, including the reason her husband had built 2 lives. The next morning, she acted normal. She served breakfast, kissed him goodbye, and waved from the porch like always. But inside, she was studying him. Every movement, every word, every pause. She had lived with him for over 2 decades, but suddenly, he felt like a stranger in her kitchen. She began to collect evidence, quietly. Emails, text messages, travel logs, bank statements. She printed things late at night and hid them in an old shoebox under her daughter's bed. It wasn't just about confronting him, it was about understanding the depth of the deception. She needed to see how far it went. Days turned into weeks. And the more she uncovered, the more it broke her. He wasn't just seeing this other woman, he was living with her, supporting her, loving her. Their children called him Dad. They looked like him, one even had his dimples. She felt sick knowing. Her children weren't his only family. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal, it was the parallel life. The smiles, the memories, the normalcy he had with someone else. She wondered if he laughed differently when he was with them. If he ever missed her when he was away. Or if they were the real family and she had just been the cover. She couldn't tell her kids, not yet. They adored their father. She didn't want to shatter their image of him, at least not before she figured out what to do. So she waited and watched and plotted. She started therapy, pretending it was for stress. But in truth, she was preparing for war. Then, one afternoon, she followed him. He thought he was flying to Houston, but she saw the rental car reservation. He was staying local. She tailed him for over an hour until he pulled into a driveway she didn't recognize. A small, cozy house with a tire swing. A child ran to greet him. His child. She parked a block away, hands trembling. She watched him lift the child into his arms and kiss the woman who opened the door. It was too much. She lowered her head onto the steering wheel and screamed. Not out of rage, but out of grief. She had lost something she didn't even know. Was stolen. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, is that this confrontation would not go how she expected. Because behind that other door was a secret even the other woman didn't know. And when it came to light, it would twist everything, including the reason her husband had built 2 lives. She drove home in silence, the image of him holding that child seared into her memory. Her chest felt hollow. She tried to cry, but couldn't. The shock was too thick, like fog. Even her tears were stunned. She kept repeating, how long? How could he? But no answer came. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying herself. Lines she hadn't noticed before, shadows under her eyes. Was I not enough? The question circled like a vulture. But deep down, she knew this wasn't about her. It was about him. The next morning, she called in sick to work. She needed time to breathe, to think, to not pretend everything was fine. She went for a long walk in the park, somewhere anonymous. No makeup, hair pulled back. She just needed to feel real. Because everything else felt like a lie out later that day. She opened her laptop and started writing a letter not to him, but to Brenda, the storyteller. The one who reads the unspoken tragedies of women like her. She poured her soul into the keyboard. Every discovery, every ache, every fragment of her unraveling, but something stopped her from hitting send. Not fear. Not shame, but something deeper. A voice, a whisper in her gut telling her to wait, because the story wasn't over. Not yet. She had more to uncover. And she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was bigger than infidelity. So she hired a private investigator. Quietly, discreetly. She gave him everything she had, names, addresses, license plate photos, and then she waited. Days turned into a week. She busied herself with work and the kids, wearing a smile that barely held its shape. When the call came, her hands shook. The investigator said, I have something, but I'm not sure you're ready. That's when she knew this wasn't just about cheating. This was about identity, about deception on a level she hadn't prepared for. Her stomach twisted into knots. She met him in a diner across town. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, documents, and something she hadn't expected, a second name, her husband's name, but not the one she knew. And with that, the puzzle pieces began to fall into terrifying alignment. She stared at the folder, her fingers trembling as she turned the pages. The investigator had found a second identity, same face, same man, but a different name used years ago in another state, a different address, a different profession, even a different marital status. Her husband had once been married before. But it wasn't just the marriage, it was that he had left that life behind completely. Faked a move, vanished. His past wasn't just shady, it was rewritten. Her heart thudded louder than the chatter in the diner. Her reality was shifting. The photos were the worst. One in particular showed him standing in front of a modest home, arm around a woman with dark hair, holding a baby. That woman was not her, and that baby couldn't be more than 2 years older than their eldest daughter. Overlapping timelines, she pressed her lips together, trying not to cry in public. The investigator looked at her with pity, like he knew what this meant. There's more, he said gently. I think he's been living 2 lives. Not just one in the past. I believe he's been seeing both families. That night, she didn't confront him. She watched him instead, studied his behavior, the way he touched his phone, the way he avoided eye contact. And suddenly, all those late work meetings and weekend trips made a sickening kind of sense. He was still doing it. Right now, she checked. Their bank statements. There were payments to a private mailbox in another city, charges from a gas station hours away, hotels, restaurant bills for 2. Everything was there, hidden in plain sight. He had been financing someone else's life. It wasn't just betrayal. It was duplication. He had replicated his role as husband and father. She wondered how many other women had received the same bouquet of roses on their birthday. How many business trips had ended in another woman's arms, another child's. Bedtime story. She felt rage, but also something more dangerous, clarity. He wasn't just a liar. He was a man who built illusions like houses of cards. And now she stood at the base of it all, breath steady, ready to blow it all down with a single truth. But not yet. Not before she was sure. She started keeping her own notes, mirroring the investigator. Every small detail became evidence. When he left his phone unattended, she photographed messages, traced the calls, and even matched receipts he left in his jacket with calendar entries. On his phone, one entry stood out: a weekend conference in a city nearby. She remembered that weekend vividly. Their daughter had broken her arm, and he said he couldn't leave the hotel. But now she knew he hadn't been at a hotel with colleagues. He had been with them, She zoomed into a photo the investigator provided. That same weekend, her husband had been photographed at a park, pushing a stroller beside the same dark-haired woman and the child, who looked far too much like him to be a coincidence. The truth was undeniable now. Her rage didn't burn it. Simmered, cold, and calculating. She began to think like him. What did he gain from this double life? Why build two homes, two facades, two families? Was it control? Was it ego? Or had he simply believed he'd never be caught? She looked at their wedding photos again. Had he lied even then? She tried to remember details, who he invited, what parts of his family were absent. Suddenly it all made sense. He had always kept her separate from certain parts of his life, because those parts already existed. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was existential. Who had she married? Who had raised children with her, made promises under a false name? She wasn't just the wife. She was an extra, an unknowing participant in his web of deceit, and now the center of its unraveling. And yet, she didn't feel powerless. She felt dangerous. She held his secrets now. She could break him with a single sentence. But she wanted more than justice. She wanted precision. She wanted to watch him feel the floor collapse under his lies 1 inch at a time. So she kept quiet, played the same role he had cast her in, smiled when he walked in, asked about his day, and kissed him goodnight with the knowledge that he was walking toward a reckoning. He just didn't know when. She began rehearsing conversations in her headlines she would say when the moment came. Not in rage, not in desperation, but in terrifying calm. Tell me, when exactly did you decide I was disposable? Or do you love her more? Or just differently? Every morning, she practiced her smile in the mirror. Not because she felt happy, but because she needed to perfect the illusion. He couldn't see the shift in her posture, the new sharpness in her gaze. If he noticed anything, he'd vanish before she had the final blow. The investigator advised patience, saying that exposure without proof could backfire, but she was already 10 steps ahead. She scheduled a dinner party. She invited her in-laws, a few close friends, and one very specific guest, a woman named Rachel, the sister of the other woman. Rachel didn't know the full story, but she suspected things too. They had exchanged messages in secret, their shared curiosity blossoming into an alliance. Rachel provided subtle clues, locations, times, even a few screenshots without fully understanding what her brother-in-law had done. The dinner party was set. She arranged the table like nothing was wrong. Her husband laughed in the kitchen, pouring wine, asking if the roast was done. She looked at him and thought, "You're serving drinks in a house of glass. And tonight, I'll throw the first stone." She seated Rachel directly across from him. Their eyes met and something shifted in his face. Not fear, not guilt, but calculation. For the first time, he realized the game might be slipping out of his control. She watched him flinch internally, just slightly, when Rachel said hello. He asked who invited her, trying to act casual. She shrugged and replied, "Oh, we've been chatting for a while. I thought it'd be nice to meet properly." He forced a smile. It was the first time she saw him sweat without physical exertion. It was delicious. That night, she didn't sleep, not from anxiety, but from satisfaction. He had felt it. The wobble in his world. The hairline crack in the mirror he used to control everything. And tomorrow, she would widen it. Slowly, strategically, until it shattered in front of everyone. The next morning, he was oddly affectionate, making coffee, kissing her forehead, asking if she needed anything. It was laughable. He thought a few soft gestures could rewind everything. But she wasn't playing that part anymore, she was directing the entire stage now. She watched him carefully, noting every twitch, every pause in conversation. He didn't ask about Rachel again. That silence spoke volumes. He was planning, regrouping, trying to get ahead. But he didn't know she had already seen the end of this movie, and he was the villain. She made another quiet move, visiting his office during lunch without telling him. She acted like a loving wife bringing a surprise meal. But it was the receptionist's reaction that gave her the first real jolt of clarity. A double take, a forced smile, then awkward silence. "Oh, you're his wife," the girl said, like she had accidentally touched something hot. "He's out, ... I think he's in a meeting." The lie was too thin, and her trembling voice cracked the facade wide open. The woman smiled sweetly and left, holding her rage behind her teeth. She didn't cry, not once. Not in the car, not in the driveway, not even in the shower. But that night, she stood in their bedroom, looking at the photos on the wall, wedding memories, beach trips, family portraits, and whispered, "You've already left me, haven't you?" Then she walked outside, barefoot, into the cold. The sky was dark and starless, the air sharp, but she felt clear for the first time in years. She wasn't a woman scorned, she was a woman awake. And awake women don't beg, they build plans. When she returned, he was in bed, pretending to sleep. She lay beside him, still and silent, thinking of every smile she'd faked, every birthday she celebrated while he texted someone else. She realized how many moments were poisoned with lies she hadn't known were lies. In that moment, she decided, no confrontation, no screaming match. She would dismantle him in silence. Brick by brick, lie by lie. She would become the mystery he never solved, the regret he never outran. And when she vanished, it would be with everything he cared about. The next few days were a masterclass in calm deception. She kissed him goodbye every morning, cooked dinner, laughed at his dull jokes, but behind her eyes, something deadly had bloomed. Not rage, but clarity. She was collecting receipts, carefully. Quietly. She went through his drawers when he was out. Nothing. Then she checked the garage, his old toolboxes, the glove compartment of his car, a burner phone, hidden under the passenger seat. The screen still lit up. She opened the messages. Her hands didn't even tremble. The name was fake, just a single letter, C. But the content wasn't explicit messages. Coordinated meetings. And one photo. A mirror selfie of a woman in lingerie, cropped below the eyes. But the body told enough. It wasn't Rachel. This was someone else. Suddenly, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern. A sickness. She had wasted her loyalty on a man addicted to conquest. And worse, he was smart enough to cover his tracks, but not careful enough to expect her to evolve. And she had evolved into his worst nightmare. She printed everything, stored digital copies in secret folders, mailed one envelope to her work office, another to her sister. She wasn't going to act without protection. If he suspected anything, she could vanish with enough leverage to bury him. The old version of her would have broken down by now. She'd be crying in the kitchen, begging him to be honest. But not this time. This version walked past him with a smile, kissed his cheek, and said, "Sleep well, baby." And he never saw the shadows in her eyes. That night, she dreamed of fire, of matches and gasoline, but not literally emotionally. She dreamed of igniting everything he thought he controlled, and then walking away from the flames without looking back. He had taught her something useful, how to destroy. In the morning, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Strong, cold, sharp. She whispered to her reflection, "He has no idea who I am anymore." And she was right. Because the version of her he once manipulated no longer existed. Rachel started to study him like a stranger. She noticed patterns when he left, how long he was gone, the excuses he recycled. His phone never left his side anymore. Even in the bathroom, it followed him like a loyal dog. That only made her. More certain. She began testing him subtly, mentioning old friends who had caught their spouses cheating, watching his face. No reaction. Then she casually joked about burner phones. He chuckled too fast. His lips said crazy, but his eyes said nervous. She planted small lies to see if he'd repeat them. He did. Like he was still confident she trusted him completely. And why wouldn't he? She had never once betrayed his trust. Never raised her voice, but that wasn't weakness. That was strategy now. Every night, she planned her escape. Not just to leave, but to win. She wasn't going to be a victim in his story. She was going to be the twist. The one nobody saw coming. He was about to learn what it felt like to be outplayed at his own game. And then, on a quiet Wednesday, the final piece dropped. She followed him discreetly after he left for drinks with a coworker. She stayed 3 cars behind. He pulled into a motel one she didn't even know existed. She parked, waited. 30 minutes later, a woman arrived. The same woman from the photo. Different outfit, same energy. Rachel felt her chest burn, not with heartbreak, but with clarity. She didn't need to confront them. Not yet. This wasn't the moment to explode. This was the moment to document. She took photos. Video, license plates. Time-stamped everything. The evidence stacked like bricks in a wall she'd eventually bury him under. She wasn't just planning revenge. She was building a fortress of facts. And when it came crashing down, he'd be beneath the rubble. As she drove away, she didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just whispered to herself, one more move and checkmate, because Rachel wasn't broken. She wasn't even hurt. She was cold, calculated, and moments away from turning his perfect little world to ash. Rachel returned home before him like nothing had happened. She reheated leftovers, lit a candle, and played soft jazz on the speaker. She greeted him with a kiss, feigning warmth so perfectly that even she almost believed it. That was the key, never tip your hand too soon. He talked about his coworker night with confidence, spinning a tale about bar food and boring meetings. Rachel smiled, nodded, even laughed at his joke about office politics. Inside her stomach churned, not with sadness, but with hunger for justice. That night, while he showered, she transferred all the photos and videos to a secure flash drive. She stored it in a hidden compartment inside a hollowed-out book in their living room. Ironically, it was a book he had given her for their anniversary. Trust. She began noticing things she'd ignored for years. The way he never asked about her dreams anymore. How he left her out of plans with mutual friends. The way he'd roll his eyes when she spoke for too long. All the little signs were always there. She just didn't want to see them, but now she saw everything. Clear and sharp like glass. And instead of feeling small, she felt powerful. Every lie he told was another thread she'd pull when it was time to unravel him. She wasn't just documenting a betrayal. She was composing his downfall. She started planting her own story subtly into their social circles. "I've been feeling disconnected lately," she'd say. "Or marriage is so much work, isn't it?" People began to look at her with knowing eyes. She was shaping the narrative before the truth exploded. The more she played the doting wife in public, the more he let down his guard. He thought he had her wrapped around his finger. But it wasn't love he saw in her eyes anymore, it was precision. Rachel was no longer playing by his rules. She was designing her own game, and when she looked at herself in the mirror that night, she didn't see a scorned woman, she saw a strategist. She whispered, "You wanted a clever woman? You got one." The final act hadn't begun yet, but when it did, the curtain would fall hard. Rachel didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. She didn't want to scream or throw things or cry in front of him. That would be too easy for him to dismiss. She wanted something more elegant, something unforgettable, something that would leave a mark without raising her voice. She remembered the company gala that was approaching a perfect stage. He'd be there, surrounded by colleagues, bosses, friends. He loved attention. He lived for applause. What better place to take? The mask off? But not yet. The moment had to be timed with surgical precision. In the meantime, Rachel kept documenting everything. She downloaded call logs, backed up text messages, even printed receipts from shared accounts. Every piece was a puzzle, every lie a confession. It wasn't just about exposing him, it was about protecting herself completely. One evening, while folding laundry, she found a crumpled note in his pocket. It wasn't from the coworker, it was from another woman. The handwriting was unfamiliar, curvy, juvenile. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was everything." Her chest tightened. There was more. It wasn't just one affair. He was juggling multiple lies, like a man addicted to his own deception. Rachel stared at the note and laughed, not from humor, but from disbelief. How had she lived so long in a world so carefully constructed on illusions? The next morning, she put that note in the same hollow book, alongside pictures, messages, even audio recordings. Her evidence grew like a wildfire, and she watched it burn with a quiet smile. Soon, it wouldn't be a secret stash. It would be her stage lights. She began rehearsing what she'd say, every word calculated, each pause deliberate. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all the women who were gaslit into silence. All the wives, girlfriends, partners, who were made to feel crazy for asking questions. She wasn't just going to survive this. She was going to flip the narrative. He had turned her life into a game, and now she had mastered the rules. And when the moment came, it would be her voice. Everyone listened to, and his silence that would echo loudest. The night of the company gala arrived, glittering with champagne flutes, camera flashes, and polished egos. Rachel walked in with quiet elegance, wearing the red dress he always said was too much. Tonight, she wanted to be too much. She wanted to be unforgettable. He greeted her at the door like nothing had happened. Arm around her waist, lips grazing her cheek, all for show, that Rachel smiled. Not the same smile as before, but the smile of someone who holds a secret and the power that comes with it. As the evening unfolded, she chatted, laughed, danced even. She didn't want to give anything away too soon. But inside her clutch purse was a small envelope, thick, sealed, and addressed to his boss. It contained only a fraction of what she had collected, He gave a speech on stage, thanking her for her support and love, his voice syrupy and fake. The crowd clapped. Rachel watched him like a stranger. In that moment, she wasn't his wife. She was his reckoning, wrapped in satin and self-control. After the applause faded, she made her move. She approached his boss, handed him the envelope, and whispered, "I thought you should see this. No drama. No scene. Just the sharp edge of truth handed over in silence." She didn't even look back. Back home, he walked in looking pale, phone in hand, his voice trembling. "What did you do?" he asked, eyes wide with panic. Rachel simply sat on the couch and crossed her legs. "I gave you every chance," she said. "You chose your mask over me." He tried to explain, to beg, to spin his usual stories. But this time, his words held no weight. She had taken back her power, not by screaming, but by dismantling him piece by piece. He finally realized the woman he underestimated was his greatest threat. Rachel didn't just leave that night, she ended an era. She stepped out of his lies and into her own story. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't confused. She was free. And he was left in the ruins of the empire he built on betrayal. The fallout came faster than she expected. By morning, headlines were circulating in industry newsletters. Whispers turned into calls, and those calls turned into silence. The kind of silence that ruins reputations. The kind he couldn't talk. His way out of Rachel stayed quiet. She didn't gloat or post cryptic quotes online. She let the truth do the talking. Friends who once admired their perfect marriage began reaching out confused, curious, some even apologetic. She answered, "None of them." She owed no one an explanation. Her children, now adults, noticed the shift. Her daughter asked, "Mom, are you okay?" And Rachel smiled for real this time. "I'm getting there," she said. It was the first time she had said those words without lying to herself. It felt like oxygen. Days passed. He tried damage. Control. He accused her of sabotage, of destroying everything they built. But Rachel had only removed the veil. He destroyed himself by hiding behind it for so long. The truth wasn't an attack, it was a release. And in that release, Rachel found something unexpected, relief. No more pretending. No more sleepless nights questioning her worth. No more justifying his wandering eyes or minimizing his betrayals. She had survived the storm, and in the wreckage, she found herself. She began to revisit old dreams. The ones she shelved for his ambitions, painting, teaching, traveling. She booked a trip for one, without guilt or hesitation. She no longer needed a partner to feel complete. Her own company had become enough. In a journal, she wrote letters, not to him, but to herself. She wrote about the woman she was, the one she became, and the one she was finally becoming. Each page a promise to never shrink for someone else's comfort again. And then, in a twist of fate, the cousin, the one who sparked everything, reached out. Not with romance, not with revenge, but with clarity. "I never meant to complicate your life," he said, "but maybe you needed to be shaken to wake up." She didn't disagree. The fallout came faster than she expected. By morning, headlines were circulating in industry newsletters. Whispers turned into calls, and those calls turned into silence. The kind of silence that ruins reputations. The kind he couldn't talk. His way out of Rachel stayed quiet. She didn't gloat or post cryptic quotes online. She let the truth do the talking. Friends who once admired their perfect marriage began reaching out confused, curious, some even apologetic. She answered, "None of them." She owed no one an explanation. Her children, now adults, noticed the shift. Her daughter asked, "Mom, are you okay?" And Rachel smiled for real this time. "I'm getting there," she said. It was the first time she had said those words without lying to herself. It felt like oxygen. Days passed. He tried damage. Control. He accused her of sabotage, of destroying everything they built. But Rachel had only removed the veil. He destroyed himself by hiding behind it for so long. The truth wasn't an attack, it was a release. And in that release, Rachel found something unexpected, relief. No more pretending. No more sleepless nights questioning her worth. No more justifying his wandering eyes or minimizing his betrayals. She had survived the storm, and in the wreckage, she found herself. She began to revisit old dreams. The ones she shelved for his ambitions, painting, teaching, traveling. She booked a trip for one, without guilt or hesitation. She no longer needed a partner to feel complete. Her own company had become enough. In a journal, She wrote letters, not to him, but to herself. She wrote about the woman she was, the one she became, and the one she was finally becoming. Each page a promise to never shrink for someone else's comfort again. And then, in a twist of fate, the cousin, the one who sparked everything, reached out. Not with romance, not with revenge, but with clarity. I never meant to complicate your life, he said, but maybe you needed to be shaken to wake up. She didn't disagree. Rachel agreed to meet him, not for closure, but for truth. They sat across from each other at a quiet cafe, no longer defined by temptation, but by experience. He looked older now, tired in ways she hadn't noticed before. She wasn't angry, just clear. He apologized not for the affair, but for seeing her as a way to get back at his cousin. You deserve more than to be used as a weapon, he said. She nodded slowly. She had already forgiven him long before this moment. But it still hurt Doc. She confessed something too. Part of me wanted to hurt him, she said. I wanted him to feel humiliated, unsure, like I did for years. And that part of her got what it wanted, but it didn't feel as satisfying as she thought. It felt hollow. The cousin didn't try to rekindle anything. He smiled, finished his coffee, and said, You're stronger than both of us ever gave you credit for. And then he left. Just like that. No drama, no promises. Just the strange peace that follows when all the games end. Back home, Rachel stared at the ring she had worn for decades. It was just metal now, a symbol stripped of meaning. She dropped it into a drawer she'd never open again. It didn't represent her anymore. She didn't need symbols to feel strong. She planned a dinner with her children, this time without secrets. She told them the truth, not the graphic details, but enough to explain the woman she had become. Her son teared up. Her daughter held her hand. For the first time, they truly saw her. Later that night, she lit a candle and opened her laptop. The letter to Brenda was almost complete. But before sending, she added one last paragraph. One final truth that would give her story the twist it deserved. The piece that would shock even Brenda. I took a paternity test after everything blew up, she wrote. It was more curiosity than suspicion. But Brenda, you won't believe it. My son isn't my husband's. He's the cousin's, all those years ago. I must have already known, deep down.